Considering how often the enemies of Jesus Christ would approach him with the intention of trying to trap him in his speech, I suppose it must have come as something of a relief that someone actually came to him in sincerity, with an honest question, seeking to understand. Which is the first of all of the commandments? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. I suppose, and understandably so, that at first glance, Jesus Christ is addressing this commandment to our broken humanity, fractured as it is by sin, trying to reassemble all of our parts and unite them in a single purpose, the love of God. But that's not really what's going on. And I think it's more fair to say that what's taking place is something that is altogether emphatic. That what we have presented to us are four ways of saying the same thing. Love God as your supreme good above all else. Because, what is the heart? When we talk about the heart, we understand it as to be that deepest center of ourselves. It is often referred to as the place of decision. It's where all of our actions originate. We talk about the soul as being the principle of animation. It is why we have life, why we are living beings. All things that live have a soul. That is a principle of animation. Our mind. It's one of the faculties of the soul. And to say, with all our strength, is to pursue the fulfillment of this commandment, with perseverance and great determination. It's four ways of saying our whole being must be engaged in this enterprise. But let's look at how this commandment begins. Hear, O Israel. That's curious, isn't it? At least I think so. Hear, O Israel. But it's more than just curious. It's significant. And I think for very good reason. And so to understand its significance, let's look at ways of knowing. We've gone over these before, in the past. So let's talk about the scientific way of knowing. The scientific way of knowing is more visual because it's based on observation, right? But despite the tremendous growth and complexity of our scientific knowledge, at the end of the day, none of this tells us who God is as He is. That's one way of knowing, but it has its limitations. Then we look at the ancient Greeks and their love of philosophy. We all ought to love philosophy. But you look at the great philosophical masters of ancient Greece, And by use of reason alone, even though Greece believed in this pantheon of gods, the philosophers nonetheless, by use of reason alone, were able to determine that there had to be an uncaused cause, one principle of everything. And they were monotheists. They were very countercultural at the time. But see, that reveals something to us of the power of the human mind. It's an amazing instrument. But it cannot tell us who God is in and of himself. And so even philosophy has its limitations. And so therefore enters in why the greatest commandment is preceded by an imperative. Hear, hear, O Israel. What's going on? Well, what's going on is what St. Paul would describe. We are told by him that faith, which is a way of knowing things that cannot be observed, knowing things that cannot be arrived at by use of human reason alone, knowing things as only God can reveal them, these truths, this knowledge must be spoken and it has to be heard. Which is why St. Paul says faith comes through hearing. Listen, O Israel. This is why when we look at Psalm 95, we hear those words that are all too familiar to us. If today you hear the voice of the Lord, harden not your hearts. Why is that so important? Because the heart is that place of decision where our actions originate. And so when God speaks, the God who made us, when he speaks, we are not to harden that place of decision against him. Because when we do, we make ourselves his adversary. Don't we? We can look at this and say, well, this is all good and fine, but, how do we go about, listening, hearing? How do we grow, in this faith, this way of knowledge that, we may, come to, know God as he truly is. And in the process, come to discover ourselves as God sees us. Well, I think that it's quite simple. It's that daily habit of mental prayer, isn't it? I mean, it all kind of boils down to on how we choose to use the faculties of our soul. How it is we choose to engage our mind. I mean, do you ever stop to consider, that when you take in, certain entertainments, or certain studies, or certain occupations, and then, even, some things that, of course, we know are clearly, sinful, and it shouldn't be considered entertainment, that when we engage with these things, you know what we're doing? There is a sense in which we are meditating upon them. And they form and they shape our thinking, and they become part of who we are. And when they enter into our heart, our place of decision, its fruits become visible in our actions. And so we cannot ever diminish, the importance of a daily habit, of mental prayer. And what does that consist of? Well, it consists of listening to God, the God who made us, encountering Him in the sacred scriptures, using our mind, to consider the things that Jesus has said and the things that Jesus has done. To use our memory to recall these things, to engage our imagination, to picture them in our head, to imagine ourselves there as though we were hearing the words He spoke with His disciples. And to respond, to what God is saying, with our own conversation, in prayer. To have that conversation each day with the God who made us and whom we know loves us very much. And let's look at some examples, in the sacred scriptures. The first, greatest example, of course, is our Blessed Mother, herself. Scriptures don't talk an awful lot about her, but what it does say speaks volumes. And what it does say is that when she heard her Son, and when she considered His deeds, where did she place them? Deep into her heart, that place of decision. And there she pondered. And so it's no surprise that as a woman of prayer, of profound contemplation, that her will was so perfectly united to that of God. There was no question. Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done unto me according to your word. See, that's the fruit, right, of receiving that word into the place of decision, isn't it? How often do we fall into that lie of the ancient serpent? When we look at all that God had told Adam and Eve, and the serpent comes slithering along, and what does he want to do? He wants to insinuate doubt into the minds of Adam and Eve. That God is someone not to be trusted. He doesn't have your best interests at heart. And proof is that He won't let you near that tree. And you're forbidden to eat its fruit. See, He's hiding something. He's keeping something from you. He can't be trusted. And so we say, you're right. I'm me. I know what I want. I know what will make me happy. So I'm going to do everything my way. But we know that at the end of the day, it doesn't fulfill those things that our heart truly desires. Only that which is spoken by the God who made us. And that those words find a place deep within our heart. So that little by little, with the operations of His grace, he brings our will more into alignment with his, so that seeing what he sees, we recognize it as good and pursue that. We look at the occasion when Jesus was at dinner in the house of Martha and Mary and Lazarus, and you know the episode all too well. Martha's in an uproar. She's so busy with all the details of hospitality, and she's getting no help from her sister Mary. And so she complains. Lord, my sister has left me to do all the work. Now, Jesus didn't condemn the work, did he? At all. Everything Martha was doing, her intention, her activity, the end toward which it was oriented, all very good. Can you think of anything better than the opportunity of showing Jesus Christ hospitality in your own house? Well, guess what? There is something better, because Jesus Christ called it. It was Mary. And it was the choice she made. Where was she during all this? She was sitting at the feet of the Lord doing what? Listening to him. Listening. And Jesus said, she had chosen the better part, and it will not be taken away from her. At his baptism, Jesus came up from the waters of the Jordan River, and as the Holy Ghost descended upon him in the form of a dove, the voice was heard, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." And again, taking Peter, James, and John up to Mount Tabor, where he was transfigured before them, and where he was conversing with Moses and Elijah about his upcoming passion. The apostles didn't know what to make of the situation. And they were overwhelmed by a cloud and became terrified. And in that cloud, a voice thundered, "This is my Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." How often? Right? How often? Examples could be multiplied on and on and on. But it all comes down at the end of the day, to taking that time. Because see, you can't love a God you don't know, can you? And I've said this before. Why do you want to spend eternity in heaven with a God you won't talk to now? Right? And it does become, a question, because, people, they want to know God. They want to grow in their love of God, and I have no doubt, of that sincerity, and that desire. It's just that at the end of the day, it's like, but why does it have to be that? Why do I have to have a daily discipline of mental prayer? Because that's how God created us, for communion with him. Right? We have to listen. As God reveals himself, so that we grow in our knowledge of him, and in our knowledge, it increases our love. And as he reveals himself to us, he reveals who we are. And then who we are in relation to him. And this is why the second commandment is like the first, is that when we discover ourselves, we discover each other. That's why the two commandments, to love God and to love neighbor, go hand in hand, and why Jesus called them one. Bear this in mind. I've mentioned this before. When you talk about each of us being a unique and unrepeatable creation that reflects something of the perfection of God, we know that because God is infinite, those manifestations in the creation of the human person are also infinite. We can safely say that there are many more people God could have created but did not. You have to put a cap on it, a limit at some point. You're not going to create an infinite, numberless number of people to reflect your infinite, unfathomable perfection. But what is so wonderful, and what is so marvelous and so beautiful, is that of all the possibilities, of all the people that God could have created and did not, He chose to create you. That's something astounding. That's something spectacular. That truly makes you unique and unrepeatable and so deeply loved. Otherwise, why would you be here? You know, and it does. It kind of comes down to, those things that we hook or hang our priorities on. And what the first and greatest commandment is that there are lots of things to know and enjoy and love in this world, and do so. My goodness. But order them properly. Put all things in their proper order and in their proper perspective. And to pursue, the knowledge and the love of God above all other enterprises and occupations. To spend that time each day with the God who made you, the God who loves you very much.